Okay. So I think we will do the gospel. We'll do John's gospel. We're reading from John 10, starting at verse 11. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. And the wolf attacks and the flock scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of the sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Okay, just quickly, if you're the first service, you heard this, but the fourth Sunday of the Easter season has a commemoration attached to it. It's referred to as Good Shepherd Sunday. And the collect for that fourth Sunday makes that plain. O God, whose Son, Jesus is the good shepherd of your people. Grant that when we hear his voice, we may know him who called us each by name and follow where he leads. So every fourth Sunday, the readings will change slightly, but they're all going to be shepherd oriented. Jesus is always going to talk about being a shepherd, because this is not the only time he talks about being a shepherd, right? And then that collect's kind of connecting it together. So before we start going verse by verse here in this, let me just lay out the rationale for why. So better, we're far now. Okay, so let me lay out the rationale for why. So the first Easter morning, it's always a resurrection appearance, right? It's always an empty tomb. The second Sunday of Easter is always, you remember what? Doubting Thomas. The third Sunday after Easter is also going to be a resurrection appearance. It's typically either the road to Emmaus or what we had last week because of the year we were in, where Jesus is appearing to the disciples in the upper room right after the road to Emmaus, and even kind of references it. But the first three Sundays are always resurrection appearances. They're always kind of in the timeline of Easter morning and those next few days after the fact. Okay. Now, the fourth Sunday of Easter, all of a sudden we backtrack to way before Holy Week at some point. And like this one's John 10, which happens quite some time before the crucifixion. And I would say the quick question is why? I mean, eventually you're going to run out of resurrection appearances to talk about, so you got to change at some point. But why the fourth Sunday and why Good Shepherd? It's not random. It's perfect. Like there's a topic, there's a theme. So the first time we get a non-resurrection gospel of Easter, like a resurrection appearance, it's supposed to be connected to Jesus as Good Shepherd. Any thoughts? This is not like a hard and fast rule, but I think I know why. Yeah, so it references what he will do, what his work is now through the resurrection in relation to us. Yeah. So this is a very interpretive, instructional theme that says this resurrected Jesus will now shepherd us through life and through death. And so this is the first time the resurrection appearances don't stand on their own. Now it starts talking about what those resurrection appearances mean from here on out. So I kind of liken it to the Christmas readings, where you've got Luke chapter 2 with a manger and a baby in swaddling clothes and the angels. And then you have John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You have that kind of what happens and what it means. That seems fair. I'm not going to smack anybody for suggesting that it means something different than that, or the reason they picked it is different than that. That's the way it always struck me. Maybe somebody taught me that at some point, but I think this all follows in line, that now that we've kind of gotten some of the resurrection appearances reread and reproclaimed, we're shifting to what that means and what it should mean to us. Good? Okay.
We may need more. None of us are shepherds.
Yeah.
We don't associate with shepherds.
Right.
We don't know anything about shepherding unless I happen to grow up on a farm, so I know a little bit. But
Yeah.
some of the examples of
It does get a little more obscure the further away we are from any kind of agrarian or rural society. You know, I've barely been around any sheep at all, let alone like an actual shepherd and flocks and stuff like that. Now, there are still people who do. You know, this still exists in the world, but yes, the metaphor has lost some of the immediacy. Yeah. You know, but it's funny that it remains an enduring statement that God chooses to apply to himself. Like if he's going to do that, then to me, there's a permanence to that. That's like, you know, when God says he's Father, well, you can come up with other titles and names too, and that's fine. And some of these descriptors are helpful, but if he's identified himself, then we need to take that seriously. In no portion of scripture does Jesus say, I'm the good systems analyst. Now, could we refer to him in such a manner and learn something about his relationship to us and how he, you know, debugs our lives and oversees our critical failure? Yeah, we can do anything. But shepherd is so significant throughout Old and New Testament alike. So let's hit it real quick, and we'll try to pull out a couple of shepherdy things about this. So he starts off with, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I think there's an implicit contrast. He doesn't just say, I am a shepherd. What kind of shepherd is he? A good one. A good one. What does that strike you as? Good. Why good?
Oh, conscientious.
Conscientious. Yeah.
Well, good is God. Remember, the only one that's good is God.
See, we have a somewhat reflexive, small view of goodness, where it needs to be holistic. It needs to be both good in its aptness and in its quality, but also in its purpose and in its moral context. So, for instance, the sad truth is I've had colleagues who were good, skilled, compelling preachers, speakers, administrators, or whatever, but I fear they were not good priests or pastors. They did stuff or didn't do things so egregious in nature that by calling them good, like, I mean, that's like a fear and concern for all of us who dare to do this stuff. Like, we don't want to mess it up or hurt anybody else. But like so-and-so is a good judge, okay? We mean maybe that they know the law very well and they run a good courtroom, but I think we also kind of imply that they are fair and they're going to make correct, morally right and righteous judgments. So Jesus being the good shepherd means he's not just a skilled shepherd and he does the right thing, but also the goodness of him as a shepherd. That kind of follow? So that is compared and contrasted implicitly with maybe a bad shepherd or a regular shepherd. But the next line then compares it to what? A hired hand. A hired hand. Now, I've read stuff, people have taught me things, but because I never worked on a sheep farm, I don't know. But the shepherd, depending on the size of the flock, couldn't do it all. And so you hired people like subcontractors. So a hired hand, you would be working with the flock. The shepherd would be responsible for everything, but he might not be there with every sheep every day. So what's the difference between the good shepherd who is responsible, who maybe owns the flock, and a hired hand who's doing a job. Commitment, yes.
Sense of responsibility.
Sense of responsibility, absolutely. So, right, right. Like a hired hand may be brought in seasonally, or maybe brought on certain days or certain times or certain locations or certain parts of the flock and not the whole thing. But ultimately, I think the relationship difference is who is responsible and who is doing a job. And we often refer to people doing a job with a somewhat, not derogatory, but it's like, it's not the same thing. Like to do something out of love or to do something because, well, I got a job to do. It almost kind of implies like, okay, I'll do it. And that's not at all what Jesus is implying. There's no unnecessary compulsion. There's no contractual, there's no, anybody know what the word amateur means? Amateur. Yeah, like the etymology, where it comes from, what the word actually, like the root of it. So we contract amateur with what? Like in sports, amateur sports or professional sports, right? So professional is someone who's paid for it. An amateur is someone who does it out of love. That's that amore, amateur. The person who does an activity not for financial compensation, but out of love. Now we kind of tend to think as amateur meaning like less skilled. Like the pros, they're real good at it. Amateurs are people who kind of goof around and maybe don't know what they're doing. The actual root of it is, what is your reason for doing that activity? For compensation or for love? In essence, isn't Jesus an amateur shepherd? And that sounds like a funny thing to say because we're reading it in a particular way, but he's not doing it because he's being paid. Why does he do any of this? Out of love. All right. So the guy who was drawing a paycheck, when things get dicey, what does he do? He quits. He quits. Yeah. They don't pay me enough for this. Have you ever said that? And so that's what this guy says. Now, why might a hired hand run off? Why might he decide whatever I'm getting paid for, it ain't worth this?
Maybe he was attacked by a wolf.
Maybe. I mean, a dangerous animal could come. And it's one thing to be out there and kind of punching the clock because I have to watch him and you have to go get one sometimes. But now a wolf is not just threatening the sheep. If I run after that wolf, what if he turns on me? And maybe I get him or maybe he gets me. And my life is not worth whatever I'm being paid for to watch these sheep. And so when in doubt, the hired hand either steps back and say, hey, take all you want, or he just runs off. But if those sheep belong to you, if you know those sheep and love those sheep, you don't let that wolf take them. Even if you lose your own life, you go after that wolf and you stop him. So already he's using these metaphors and images they would understand, but starting to apply them in a manner where that relationship, us to him, starts filling in some practical gaps. Jesus does not fear his own death in order to protect and save us, his sheep. And that will be demonstrated through the cross. I'm not trying to be pedantic. I'm just, he's kind of laying out the case line by line. I always love this line. I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Is that practically true for sheep and shepherds?
Yes.
I've heard, yes.
I've seen it. Yes.
So I mean, I've seen like videos too. The relationship becomes so familiar that they develop like little calls, little signals, little words, and that the shepherd can call and the sheep will respond. And if like I went out there and I said the same word that shepherd said they would ignore me. And I think that's pretty cool. I did a demonstration of this years ago down in South Florida. So we had the chancel area where the altar was and the pulpit was in front of it. And the sacristy where you like put your vestments on and stuff was actually through a door back there. And I left the door ajar. Not so people could notice and they weren't paying any attention. And so I started talking about this and, knowing the name of the shepherd, the shepherd and the sheep knowing each other and recognizing things and even reference like, this relationship. And I stopped and went, and out runs my dog. We had a little Boston Terrier, Becky. Sweetest, smartest, best dog ever. And she had been sitting quietly and patiently in the sacristy. And she waited for my whistle. We had a whistle for her. It was slightly different than somebody else might do, but she also recognized mine. And you could do that whistle and she wouldn't have come because she knew me. And she ran out and she sat right there next to the pulpit. And I got to explain to people what that meant. Where we can apply that, I think, is how did my dog get trained to respond to my whistle and not yours? Broadly. She listened. Practice. Okay. That whistle we used 1,000,000 times. And she could relate it to me. She understood it. We trained with treats and stuff first, but then it was just day after day after day after day after day. We, call her from one room to the next. We let her go outside to go potty and call her and she comes back in, and all that kind of stuff. So what does that imply about us sheep knowing the voice of Jesus, our shepherd? Practice. Thank you. Practice, and practice takes repetition and practice takes time. We know the voice of Jesus. He knows us because of the time repeated that he spends with us again and again and again, day after day after day after day, year after year after year after year. Jesus doesn't just show up when we call him. I got a need. I'm going to call you up or rub the magic lamp or whatever, but to be with us on an ongoing basis, time after time after time after time. That's how an animal gets trained, and that's how we learn our voice and he knows us. There's an intimacy, a regularity, a familiarity.
The interesting thing to me when I saw the sheep, the shepherds,
Yeah.
there were two shepherds, and they joined, and the men were talking to each other, and the sheep were doing their thing. And one shepherd decided it was time to leave, and he made this funny noise.
Yeah.
And he and his sheep went off.
Huh. That's funny.
Yeah.
They just sort of separate out like, oh, that's my guy. Off we go. That's cool. It really is. And the only way to do that is for them to know you and trust you. And that takes a long time of like demonstrating that daily trust and connectedness and all that kind of stuff. And I just always took some encouragement from that. That is, it's by implication, but I don't think it's any less true. The immediacy and the constancy of the presence of Christ within our lives. The Father knows me, I know the Father, also immediate, constant. I lay down my life for the sheep. There's the cross again. I would also say you can apply the even the incarnation. To lay down his life is both a specific, literal, but I would also say it's kind of metaphorical and theological. This is that from Colossians that Christ humbles himself, taking on the form of the servant. He doesn't claim equality with God, a thing to be grasped, but he lays down what is due in order to live truly as us. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. What do you think that means?
Us, people later on.
Okay. People later on in time, true,
And place.
and place.
Gentile.
Gentiles, people in distant centuries yet to be born. So not just the people who are right there listening to him. You know, that could even feel like a sheep pen, like we're all kind of a little flock sitting out there listening to him. But I have other sheep too. And those sheep will also hear my voice, know my voice, and will come to me. There will be one flock and one shepherd. What's that one flock? The church, I would say, you know, broadly his body, and his people, his promise, his covenant, and who's the one shepherd? He is himself. Well, this reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. So we also know greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. That's also from John. Jesus will lay down his life at the cross again, or we can also add the amplification of the incarnation, which is laying down your life, at least in a broad sense. But he takes it up again. What does that mean? Lay down his life to take it up again.
Return to what was before.
Yeah, so this is where we've kind of come full circle with a Good Shepherd Sunday happening in the Easter season. We are now, this is predictive when he says it. We now can look at it in retrospect to say, well, he did die on the cross. His body was put in a tomb. Now that tomb is empty. His body is resurrected, glorified eternally, ascended into heaven, but we can still trust him to lead us through this life and into the life to come. So the life that he lays down willingly on the cross, nobody takes it from him. It's not an accident. It's not a tragedy in the sense of an unexpected, nothing could be done about it. This is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. If this cup may be passed from me, but your will be done. And like a lamb led to the slaughter, who before shears is mute, so he opens not his mouth. Even before Pilate, before the Sanhedrin, he's not fighting for his life. He's not trying to argue out of it. He's not trying to convince them to let him go. He lays it down willingly. And there's something, obviously different in quality about a life taken versus a life given, right?
All part of it now. That's the problem.
Well, but this is a plan that he willingly fulfills.
And his authority.
Aha. So that's that next piece. I have authority laid down, authority to take it up again, this command I received from my Father. Why wrap it up with this authority and command?
And the model of this work.
Okay, yeah. So, maybe connecting what Lee says about there's a plan, this is God the Father's plan. So to be granted authority is an acknowledgement of identity, of power, of ability. This can be construed as a Trinitarian commentary. This is Jesus revealing something about his relationship with God the Father, about, the authority of God is a very specific thing, very specific. And it is not granted to others because only God is God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. And there are no other gods before him. So to carry the authority of Almighty God is not something, this is beyond thus saith the Lord, spaketh the prophet. This is, I have the authority to lay down my own life and to cause these changes to fulfill this plan. I have the authority through the resurrection. This is saying something, while subtle, profound and powerful, about who he is. And this command, he's not making up on his own. He didn't read it in the book. But this is an essential unity between his plan and the plan of God the Father. All right, how's that? Anything else?
Sir, but you had said, so an alternate reading like next year would be something other than what we're doing?
It would be a different good shepherd.
Be
Maybe
a shepherd.
where Jesus says, I'm the shepherd, and I am the sheep gate.
So it's a shepherd sheep theme for this.
Well, it'll always be a gospel where Jesus references himself as a shepherd, but that happens in multiple occasions, mostly in John.
Right.
But whether it's a single long sermon that gets cut into pieces or a couple of places where shepherd language pops up again. But over the 3-year cycle, we'll have 3 different shepherd gospels. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you.